Florida Bar. Set an appointment. That's 561-733-4242. Come see me in my Delray Beach office on Atlantic Avenue. You just have to call my office at 561-733-4242. And I'm Scott Solkoff. Let me help you protect your assets, qualify for Medicaid or VA benefits, have greater peace of mind knowing that it's been done, and a higher quality of life. So again, call me, Scott Solkoff, at 561-733-4242. And remember, call your parents, not just to tell them about Scott Solkoff, just to tell them that you love them and appreciate them. I'm going to call my parents now.
The hiring of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based on advertisements alone. You can call our office at 561-733-4242 to get more information about our qualifications and expertise.
This is Talk 1470. Talk 1470. WNN.
Folks, I'm sitting here chatting with my good friend Dan Alba. He is a public adjuster with InsurAClaim. Dan, you were telling me that there may be homeowners out there who have already settled their homeowner's insurance claim, but still may be owed additional money.
Steve, that's absolutely correct. In my experience, 9 out of 10 of my clients are owed additional money. That's why I offer a free claims review. I will go over your claim and let you know how much more money you may be owed.
Sounds like a win-win situation. Nothing to lose. Take advantage of that free review of your claim. Call Dan toll free at 1-888-256-2963. That's toll free 1-888-256-2963 or online at isaclaims.com. Tell them Steve Kane sent you.
Talk 1470 WWNN Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
AM 1470 WNN with more of what you need to know. Here are the latest from Invite Health with Jerry Hickey, weekdays at 9 on AM 1470 WNN. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. The content of the following program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by a host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program should not be viewed as a substitute for personal consultation with an attorney. Welcome to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. Jeff will be discussing a variety of legal topics with experts in the field. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, let's talk legal with Jeff Van Treese.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Talk Legal. I'm your host, Jeff Van Treese. I'm an attorney with the law firm Oltman, Flynn & Kubler, where we specialize in intellectual property law, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. To check us out online and view all episodes of this show, please visit our website at oltmanpatent.com. That's oltmanpatent.com. I'd also like to thank our other sponsor, Fresh Start Tax. Fresh Start Tax offers a full range of accounting services, including tax levies, wage garnishments, and any other tax-related concern. You can visit them online at freshstarttax.com. I'd like to thank all of our listeners, including those of you tuning in on the AM dial, as well as those watching online. If you have a question, comment, or story that you would like to share on the air, please feel free to call us toll-free at 888-565-1470. Once again, that toll-free number is 888-565-1470. We welcome your calls. This evening, my guest will be a neuropsychologist, Gina Harris. Gina has acted as a friend of the court or an expert witness in a number of trials, criminal trials, including one that was on court TV a number of years ago. And Gina, unfortunately, is in traffic right now. This is one of the hazards of having a show at drive time, but she'll hopefully be joining us very shortly. This evening, we're going to be discussing mental health and the role of mental health in the criminal justice system. We're going to be discussing some cases that are in the news, including the upcoming trial of James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado shooter, as well as some other trials, including that of Pedro Hernandez, the man that's currently on trial for the murder of Eton Pates, which was the original child on the milk carton case from all the way back in 1979. So I'll just give some background on the James Holmes case before Gina hopefully joins us. As our listeners may remember, this case started back in 2012 when the shooting occurred. James Holmes was a neurology PhD student or a neuropsychology PhD student, and he had recently failed his comprehensive exams, and shortly thereafter he dropped out of school, purchased a lot of ammunitions and firearms, and on July 20th, 2012, he walked into a midnight screening of the movie The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado, and he opened fire into the crowd after throwing tear gas into the theater. And with his assault rifle, shotgun, and a Glock handgun, he killed 12 people and injured an additional 70 people. He's charged with murder, attempted murder, and other crimes. If convicted, he could potentially face the death penalty. He has, at this point, pled not guilty by reason of insanity, which in Colorado it's an interesting standard, because when a defendant pleads not guilty by reason of insanity, they are presumed to be insane until the state, the prosecution, proves otherwise. That's not always the case, and in fact, that's one of the interesting things about the insanity defense, is that every state's a little bit different. Some states, the defendant has to prove that they are insane, and in this case, in Colorado, it's the other way around. The defendant is presumed insane when they plead insanity, and it's up to the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was sane at the time of the crime. The insanity defense has been used in a number of famous cases, including that of Andrea Yates, John Hinckley Jr., Lorena Bobbitt, and public reaction has been generally mixed to negative with respect to the insanity defense. Generally, many people think that it's a bogus defense. It's something that people use to try to beat the rap or escape the charges. But it's something that can be misunderstood. The insanity defense in Colorado, and I'd like to read the standard, it actually is derived from the McNaughton Rule, which is a 19th century English case, which is basically is broken down into two elements. If the suspect did not understand the nature and quality of his act due to a mental disease or defect, and they must not know that the act was wrong at the time that the offense was committed. And if these conditions are met, then that individual is not considered sane. They will be judged insane, and they will be committed to a mental institution until they are deemed rehabilitated or recovered to the extent that they can be released. So I'd like to read the statute in Colorado for insanity. It reads as follows. It says, a person who is so diseased or defective in mind at the time of the commission of the act as to be incapable of distinguishing right from wrong with respect to that act is not accountable, except that care should be taken not to confuse such mental disease or defect with moral obliquity, mental depravity, or passion growing out of anger, revenge, hatred, or other motives and kindred evil conditions, For when the act is induced by any of these causes, the person is accountable to the law. And now, as you can imagine, that's a very confusing jury instruction, because the jury is going to be given this language or something similar to it, where they're essentially being asked to determine whether the defendant has a defect or disease of the mind at the time that the act was committed that makes him incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. However, by the same token, they're told not to confuse such a defect with more mental depravity or passion growing out of anger, revenge, or hatred. These two things appear to overlap so much that it seems really almost impossible to distinguish between the two, and it's going to be very difficult for many jurors to really understand what they're being asked to determine, since the line between sanity and insanity truly is very much blurred. So I'd also like to set the stage. Hopefully Gina will be joining us very shortly with respect to the other case we're going to be discussing, which is the murder trial of Pedro Hernandez. In this case, this was a man that had confessed to the murder of Eton Pates. Eton Pates was a young boy. He was 6 years old in 1979, and he was on his way to school in Soho, New York, and he just disappeared. He just vanished from the face of the earth. His body was never recovered. No evidence was ever recovered. Essentially, no one ever knew what happened to him. And then 33 years later, this defendant, Pedro Hernandez, comes forward and confesses to the murder. He says that he had strangled the boy behind a bodega in Soho. With that case, he's currently on trial for that murder, and the defense is that he was under a delusional state. In other words, he was not telling the truth when he confessed to this crime and was essentially just totally under delusion. Now, with that case, it really brings up an interesting legal question, which is whether or not somebody should be charged with a crime based upon a confession alone. In fact, some states don't allow that. It's in order to charge someone with any crime based upon a confession, that confession must be corroborated at least to some extent. There must be some evidence to demonstrate that that confession is genuine. Here in New York, this defendant, Pedro Hernandez, is being tried solely based on the confession and nothing else. And it's just up to the jury to determine whether they think he really did it or not, just based on that confession. It looks like my guest, Gina, is here. She has just joined us. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back to talk to Gina. Please stay tuned.
This program is brought to you by Fresh Start Tax. Fresh Start Tax offers a full range of tax and accounting services, including tax return preparation and bookkeeping, as well as back taxes, wage garnishments, unfiled returns, or any other tax-related concern. Our dedicated team of tax attorneys, CPAs, and former IRS agents offer over 60 years of professional tax experience. For a free consultation, call 866-700-1040. That's 866-700-1040. You can also visit us on the web at freshstarttax.com. This program is brought to you by the law firm of Altman, Flynn, and Kubler. Our law firm specializes in elder law and intellectual property, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. If you would like to patent your idea, please contact our Fort Lauderdale office for a free consultation. We offer elder law services, including estate planning, long-term care planning, and preparation of healthcare documents. We strive to plan for your future needs while allowing you to retain as much dignity and independence as possible. To find out more or to make an appointment, call 954-563-4814. That's 954-563-4814. Or visit us online at altmanpatent.com. That's OLTMANPATENT.com. spokesperson, not an attorney. You're listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese, who brings you all the latest news in the legal world. If you would like to ask a question or share a story on the air, please call toll-free 888-565-1470. Once again, that's 888-565-1470. Now, back to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese.
Sure. And we're back. My guest this evening is Gina Harris. She just arrived in the very hectic South Florida traffic. So, Gina, thank you so much for joining us. And before you got here, I was discussing the upcoming James Holmes trial and the insanity plea. So I'd like to get your take on it. You, based upon your review of the case file and what you think, what we can expect to hear as the trial commences.
Well, of course.
Sure,
over here. So, trials are always mysteries. There's an alchemy. There's a mystery. The unknown is more apparent often than the known. As I was looking through some of the materials and reviewing some of the background of James Holmes, I think that one of the things that may become apparent is an appraisal or an attempt to see why and where he came to be what he is. And as a neuropsychologist, as a doctor of clinical and neuropsychology, I found it most curious that developmentally he became a deranged, unhinged, psychotic at a most formative age, in an age in which those of us who go to college, those of us who go away from home, it appeared that he was able to sustain himself only for so long. And then he fell victim to the slings and arrows of insanity. And most likely, and not to make inappropriate armchair diagnoses, but most likely to paranoid schizophrenia.
So if you were appointed to examine this defendant, what are some of the things that you would be looking for?
Well, the first thing that I would be looking for is I would want to conduct baseline scans and MRIs and CAT scans of his brain, as well as SPECT and PET scans. Then I would want to do a full battery of psychological and neuropsychological tests to determine his cognitive functioning, and also to take a full examination of his background and behavior. Did he have relatives who fell under the rubric of psychosis? Is that because, unfortunately, that frequently is common in genetics, whether it's eye color, hair color, or more troubling variables from attention deficit disorder to schizophrenia are fueled by our genetics. So I would want to do a full historical appraisal.
You know, and one of the other things is that even though this is an insanity defense, even if he's unsuccessful, even if he's found to be sane, all of this mental illness could be used as a mitigating circumstance, because this is a death penalty phase. We just saw last week the Jodi Arias death penalty phase part of the trial came to a conclusion, and she escaped the death penalty in large part because the one holdout juror, it was 11 jurors voted for death, one voted against the death penalty, and for that one juror, it was the defendant's mental state that played a very big role in her unwillingness to impose a death penalty, that being borderline personality disorder, which we've talked about that. That's a pretty serious mental condition, but it really can't compare to what we have here with James Holmes. We have paranoid schizophrenia, we have hallucinations, and it really begs the question as to why prosecutors are trying this as a death penalty case. Somebody that is under this degree of mental illness really just doesn't seem like a good candidate for the death penalty.
Well, mental illness has been a stepchild in more ways than one, I think, in the group of illnesses. So many people do not recognize the seriousness of problems such as borderline personality disorder, even what is known as schizophrenia. The thought is among many that it can be controlled, that it's a moral problem, just as alcoholism for many years was considered primarily a problem of morality and control, rather than a problem of genetics and deep emotional and personal malaise and illness.
So, and the other thing is that a lot of people bring up the horrific nature of this crime. There were 12 people were killed, but that's really a separate issue from the insanity defense. It doesn't matter how terrible the crime is. If the person is insane at the time that they committed the crime, it really doesn't matter for purposes of this defense. The question is, did they know what they were doing was wrong, and could they control what they were doing?
Yes, and on occasion, there are many who know from the on what they're doing is wrong, but cannot control. They have a cognitive understanding, and I've spoken to people who've indicated they feel like they're on the outside looking in, as if they're looking at a separate person, a tape of an individual going through the motions in a fugue state, in a cloud state, and that is frequently the appraisal of those who have been so afflicted.
And I'd also like to ask what your thoughts are on the degree of planning, because a lot of people think that if a crime is committed with a great deal of planning, as was the case here, he purchased these firearms, this ammunition, he booby-trapped his apartment with explosive devices, you'd say, well, how could you be insane, yet at the same time you carried out this elaborate plan? So I'm curious what your thoughts are, because some people think that you can't be insane if there's a high degree of planning.
Yes, I mean, not that I have any sympathy for the horrific nature and the devastation that the crime had wrought. However, people who are, quote, insane, or those who have a variety of mental illnesses, are capable of invoking what I might call an alternative order, in which they create a life and an order and a reality that is dependent on their own appraisal of reality. So if they feel that people need to be expunged or murdered, or they need things to be done, then they will do whatever actions that they have to do, whether they're rational or irrational. Entire structures can be wrought through this insanity.
I'd like to, in the few minutes we have left, I'd like to turn our attention to the Pedro Hernandez case in New York. I discussed before the break that he was convicted based entirely upon his confession, which was uncorroborated. Now there's some evidence coming out through his daughter's testimony that he might have had some antisocial personality traits, and this is now calling into question as to whether the confession might have been delusional. But what are your thoughts as you evaluate a case like that, where you have a confession but it's not corroborated and the validity of the confession is called into question? How would you, as a psychologist, evaluate that situation?
I would proceed with extreme caution, because if you do not have corroborative information, I take anything that someone says, delusional or not, I try to test out hypotheses, and certainly it's not inappropriate to do the appropriate investigation, police investigation, and see if the beliefs in the confession, delusional or not, bear any fruit. Sometimes they really do, but to go on and convict without any physical evidence is questionable and worrisome.
Now, as also I discussed before the break, in Colorado, it's actually the prosecution that has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that James Holmes was sane at the time. If he's claiming insanity, the burden's on the prosecution to claim that he was sane. That's not the case in every state. Just looking at it now, given your best guess, do you think that they're going to be capable of doing that?
Proving that he's sane?
That he was sane, yes.
Well, it may boil down to a battle of the experts. I think if the biological data is obtained, which I hope the responsible physicians and neuropsychologists will prevail, that may go a long way towards clarifying the situation. You know, you don't change your PET scans overnight, nor do you readily change your neuropsychological test results. So I think that's going to be an extremely important to get the true picture of this defendant. And once one does that, I mean, if he defies some of our predictions and he comes up clean, then the prosecutor may have some modicum of success. However, if not, then it's an open ball game.
So we are running out of time. Gina, I'd like if you could give out your information to our listeners.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. Well, my name is Dr. Gina Harris. I'm a clinical and neuropsychologist. I can be reached either through my my South Broward number, 954-966-4447, or Palm Beach, 561-791-3239. My website is www.drginaharris.com, and I'm the president of Psychological Resource Associates.
I'd like to give a special thanks to my guest, Dr. Gina Harris. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. Please tune in next week, Tuesday night from 6 to 6:30, where my guest will be former Congresswoman and elder law attorney Elaine Schwartz, where we will be discussing some upcoming bills in the Florida legislature. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you for listening to Talk Legal with Jeff Van Treese. Tune in next week for more insightful and exciting information about the law. You can contact Jeff by email at jvt2law@gmail.com or give him a call at 561-789-6866. That's 561-789-6866. The content of the preceding program, including all statements from the host and guests, is to provide